In this lesson, we'll learn about the importance of using a linear workflow in Maya and how color space plays an important role in this process. All right, fantastic. So before we dive into Maya and begin exploring this there, I wanted to take a few moments and talk to you a little bit about the importance of color space. Now, what I've got in front of me here is the exact same image, but it's obviously very, very different just looking at the two images. Now, what you need to understand about the monitor that sits in front of you right now, the same as the monitors in front of me, is that these monitors are incapable of displaying the entire range of luminance values that our human eyes can perceive. So what we have here on the left is really sort of a trick that our monitor is using to properly display basically this full range of luminance values so that it looks correct on the screen. Now, this image here on the right actually contains the same amount of luminance values that we can perceive with our human eye. Unfortunately, the monitor is just incapable of displaying all of that information. So, as a result, this image looks very wrong. It looks really dark in places. It looks very saturated in places. If you saw the entire image, you would probably think that it looks rather blown out. So, this image on the left exists in what is called an sRGB color space. This color space is something that is encoded into the file that's intended to be viewed on your monitor. Things like a JPEG or a GIF or a PNG file, or maybe a bitmap or an 8-bit TIFF. These all come with the proper color space encoding to basically look correct on our screens. Now, the mathematics behind this is that what happens is a gamma response curve of 2.2 is applied to the image so that it looks correct on our monitor. And as you can see, this image looks pretty good. Well, this image on the right, while it looks incorrect, this actually exists in a completely different color space. Now, this is called a linear color space, and you may or you may not have seen images that exist in this color space before. Now, this color space does require a special file type in order to save this range of luminance information in. This file type could be an EXR file, it could be an HDR file, or even a 32-bit TIFF file. But really what's important to understand here is that this image, while it doesn't look correct, it has a different gamma response curve applied to it. The gamma response curve here is a gamma response curve of 1.0. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. You're probably thinking, what in the world does color space have to do with rendering inside of Maya using Mental-Ray? Well, the reality is that it has everything to do with this because of the fact that really a linear workflow makes sure that the image that we see is set up to be properly viewed on our monitor and then properly output while maintaining its linear color space. All right, this is probably going to work a little better if I kind of show you an example here. So let me just move on to the next image. What I have here is a small image, and if we had taken this scene and set up all the materials and all the lights in this scene and just hit the render button, this is probably kind of what we would see come back to us. Now, this particular image has sort of a mixture of gamma response curves applied to different areas. All of the lighting in this image exists in a linear color space, and this is a default in Maya. Now, we learned a moment ago that this linear color space has a gamma response curve of 1.0 applied to it. So the lighting here is not set up to be viewed correctly on our screens. Now, the materials in this case that are applied to all of the pieces of geometry in this scene, those, however, are correctly set up to be viewed on our monitor. So while the lighting looks incorrect here, and you can see that because of the inky black shadows and the really blown out highlights here, while the lighting looks incorrect, the textures that are a result of the materials used in this scene, they do look correct. That's because they have a gamma response curve of 2.2, applied to them. Remember, these materials are linked to things like JPEGs or bitmaps and things of that nature that has this gamma response curve encoded into those files. Well, what do we end up doing to try and fix this? Well, we know the lighting is wrong. It doesn't look right on our monitor, so we need to basically apply the correct gamma curve to this lighting. So when we do that, if we come in and instead of applying a response curve of 1, we apply the gamma response curve of 2.2 to what we see in our render view. Basically what that does is while it fixes the lighting and the inky black shadows, it actually doubles the amount of gamma that's being applied to our materials. So the result is that these materials now look rather washed out. As a matter of fact, we saw that in the last lesson when we learned about the physical sun and sky. Now, this is not the proper workflow. Let me show you what the proper workflow would be. So again, we're going to start with the exact same image, the mixed gamma response curves applied here between the lighting and the materials. Instead of applying the correct gamma to the lighting, what we first need to do is we need to remove the sRGB encoded gamma correction from the materials. So we need to equalize the amount of gamma applied to each one of these. So what we do is we apply the linear color space to both the lighting and the materials. You can see here the gamma response curve of 1 has been applied to both. Now this image looks completely wrong as of right now. It's not encoded to look correct on our monitors. But the important thing here is that the gamma has been equalized. Now, when we come back in to apply the correct gamma correction to this image, we end up with something that looks like this. You can see here how our lighting has a gamma of 2.2, as well as the materials have a gamma of 2.2. So we've resolved the problem of the double gamma being applied to the materials. Let me just show you another slide here with a little bit larger images so you can compare the result of the first workflow, again with our washed out materials, to the result of the second workflow with the proper gamma response curve applied to both. This image here on the right would be a result of a proper linear workflow here inside of Maya. Now what I want to do to sort of cement this with you is I want to move on at this point to our next lesson. And what I'll do is I will work through the process of implementing this proper linear workflow with this exact same scene. So we'll do that in our next lesson.